crowds in Tahrir Square. Of course, it's Friday, so it's been a pivotal point of many of these protests where just thousands of people have poured back into the square. But the mood, of course, today, very much of celebration rather than protests. I mean, the protesters had one of their key demands met. Ahmed Shafiq, the Prime Minister, he resigned. That was a key demand of the protesters. He was replaced by Essam Sharif, the man you see on the left of your screen with a microphone in his hand. He's just being mobbed by people in the square. It was a very short speech. He said that he addressed the crowd and said, "You've achieved a great victory at great cost." He said, "The security apparatus, which has been much feared, of course, in Egypt, must work for the good of the people." He said there have been lots of demands from the opposition, but to please give them time. They're working through the demands, and he asked the people to raise their heads and hands and be proud Egyptians. So Essam Sharif giving his first public speech there in Tahrir Square. There's also, so that's on the left of your screen. On the right of your screen, we've got Benghazi in Tripoli. We've got Friday prayers there. Of course, the stronghold of the rebels, the anti-Gaddafi rebels, that's their stronghold in Benghazi. So a much more quieter scene in Libya's city, Benghazi, where we're looking at Friday prayers. And of course, on the left of the screen, events unfolding in Tahrir Square. Thousands of people again pouring into Liberation Square to hear Essam Sharif, the new Prime Minister. A very short speech, but a very impassioned speech he gave to the expectant crowd. Let's go back to Libya, if we can, talk to Hoda Abdel Hamid, who is in Benghazi. Hoda, just talk us through what's happening in Benghazi now as we're looking at these pictures.
Well, at the moment, there's the sermon of the Friday prayer, and it's a very emotional sermon. The Imam choked a couple of times when he was talking. He was basically, I think, through his sermon, answering to all the accusations that are coming out of Tripoli. He reminded the people here that this was not a tribal issue. This is not a matter of an uprising of the East versus the rest of the country, but rather it's an uprising of the Libyan people who want to gain some dignity in their lives. He also called on people here to go and help the people in the west of the country. Some pamphlets have been also distributed to the crowd, and on that pamphlet there's this direct call to the people of Sirte to stand up and rise. There is a belief that if Sirte, the hometown of Gaddafi, stands up and rise, then it will be the final moments for the regime, considering that that's where he has most of his paramilitary forces based, and that's where most of his tribe is based. There is also a direct message to the international community. I have to tell you that on the left of the square you'll see a huge poster that says no foreign intervention, and what they mean by that is no foreign soldiers on Libyan soil. They do call for air support in the form of no-fly zones and pinpointed strikes against the defense system of the government, but they say that anything that happens on the ground is a Libyan affair.
Hoda, as we're looking at pictures now on our screens of events in Benghazi, where you are, just give us a sense now of what's happening outside of Benghazi in terms of the fighting on the ground.
Well, there's certainly fighting going on in the area of Brega and AlJazeera. At this particular moment, we don't have any more information, but that's an area that has been going back and forth, especially Brega, which is the main oil and gas hub of the East. That has been, and that area has been going back and forth between Gaddafi forces and the opposition. Now, the latest we heard is that the town was in the hand of the opposition. The Gaddafi forces were circling it from one side, at least, of the town, but they were quite far away. The opposition says it has managed to create a buffer zone in that area. Now, we also know that an airstrike was carried out on the outskirts of AlJazeera early this morning. There have been no casualties there, but I think that the message is quite clear from the government here. They do have certainly any military superiority when it comes to the sky. And at the moment they are using it certainly to try to intimidate the opposition. We also heard reports that the volunteers who are going to the front line, what they call now the new front line, are also feeling very vulnerable from the air. They say that these airstrikes are also pointing at them and targeting them, even though we haven't heard of any major casualties.
All right, Hoda Abdelhamid there in Benghazi. Hoda, thank you very much indeed. Let's go back to that split screen again, if you're just joining us here on Al Jazeera English. These are live pictures coming in from two places. One, Benghazi, where Hoda was just talking from there. That's on the left of your screen. On the right of your screen are events unfolding in Tahrir Square in Cairo, where there was where there is a huge crowd at the moment. It's an atmosphere of celebration. People had come to listen to the country's new Prime Minister, Essam Sharaf, give his first talk. Let's just bring in back Shadi Hamid, Director of Research at the Brookings Institution here in Doha. He's a specialist in Middle Eastern politics. Shadi, we were talking to Ayman Mohyeddin there overlooking Tahrir Square when Essam Sharaf talked, and there was a huge roar from the crowd. But what was significant about that was that, I mean, you know, a few weeks ago you would never have seen a member of the government standing up with a senior member of the Muslim Brotherhood, would you?
I actually couldn't believe my eyes when I was looking at the images, but yes, I mean, what a reversal of fortune for the Brotherhood. I mean, just a few months ago, they were victims of government repression, mass arrests, you name it. And now here they are with a senior leader on the same stage.
It's extraordinary,
with Egypt's new prime minister. I mean, I'm having trouble getting my head around that, but it really goes to show that we're talking about a new Egypt. But I mean, obviously some people will be concerned by that. I mean, it shows that there is unity, that different political groups are coming together. At the same time, this might sort of might spark fears that the Brotherhood is rising and trying to play a more prominent role.
What sort of broad appeal does Essam Sharaf have in terms of the opposition groupings, the wider groupings? We talked about the Brotherhood, but it's not just the Brotherhood, of course. There are lots of other opposition groups. What sort of broad-based appeal does he have?
Well, as Ayman Mohyeddin said, he was a consensus candidate. He's probably not the ideal person, but he's someone that people can get around. He was with the protesters in Tahrir Square, so he is one of them. In some sense, he is a member of the opposition. And again, that's very interesting because Egypt hasn't had an opposition prime minister really since the 1940s. So we're talking about something entirely unprecedented. So in that sense, I think it was very important for the military to send this message and say, we're not going to go with the old regime elements anymore. We're going to try to find someone who was on the right side of this, on the side of the revolution.
So just talk us through that message. Just talk our viewers through what was the message that the military wanted to send by getting Essam Sharaf, the new Prime Minister, into the square on a Friday where thousands of people are going to be there.
The military is trying to say to the protesters, we're listening to you, we're not ignoring you, and we're willing to make concessions, because that was one of the major demands of the protesters, that Prime Minister Ahmed Shafiq resign and someone new who wasn't tainted by the old regime come into power. So the military showed that it is willing to meet the protesters halfway, but I think, as others have noted, this is one demand among many others. There's a whole long list of things that protesters are asking for, and those will be the ones that may